All right. Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise, honor, and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone that taught us this truth. And salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. And the elect begins with the 144,000. YAHAWAH, who the world ignorantly calls God and Jehovah. BAHASHAM is in the name. YAHAWASHI, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. The Rakakwadash, which is the Holy Spirit. I'm the brother I will with the gym at Chicago camp out here in Chicago. Come back at you brothers and sisters at a household of faith of the Hopeful Right Select with another lesson. And Lord willing, I hope this lesson be edifying through the spirit and power of YAHAWASHI. Once again, I hope this lesson is edifying. I'm just simply entitled this lesson. YAHAWASHI is going to return to take down all heathen rule. Because in Daniel it talks about till the thrones were cast down and the Ancient of Days did sit. Yahweh's going to send his son Yahawashi back to ultimately to take these heathens out of their power, man. And who's in power right now, man? He's starting with the so-called white man, Esau Edom, who's ultimately in power, who's in power right now, man. As 2nd Esdras 6 says, for Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, man. Yahawashi is going to come back, take these heathens out of power, beginning with the so-called white man, these elite banking families. And he's ultimately going to set up his government, here on the planet Earth, man. And this world is going to be ruled in righteousness, man, because ultimately the Moabites think they got next. The Ammonites think they got next. Ishmael think they got next. But ultimately, who ultimately got next, man? Yahawashi, ultimately with his governing body, which is the 144,000. So I'm going to start out right here. This is the book of Revelations 19 and verse 12. It says, in his eyes was a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. Right, it says his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. Ultimately, talking about the different, these different kingdoms that Yahawashi is going to bring down, man. Upon Yahawashi's return, he's going to take all these heathens down from out of power, man. And who's in the main power seat, man? Esau Edom, man. As I quoted the 2nd Esdras, 6 and 9, man. For Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of that fall, because Yahawashi is coming to a world ruled by the Edomites. I believe it's Isaiah 63. If I can grab it just real quick. Yep, Isaiah 63 and verse 1. It says, who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Basra, that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength? I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Right, it says, who is that coming from Edom? Who is that? Talking about Yahawashi, man. Because ultimately what? The Lord, Yahawashi, is coming into a world ruled by the Edomites, man. America being spiritual Basra, man. Who ultimately that, Esau Edom sits in his power seat right now, man. And it says, read that again, Isaiah 63 and 1, it says, who is that coming from Edom with dyed garments from Basra, that that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength? I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. It says, wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, and thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat? Right, talking about how ultimately Yahawashi is coming back to judge these Edomites, man, and these other nations, man. Talking about the mass judgment that Yahawashi is going to, ultimately bring, man. That mass death. And it says, I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me. For I will tread them in my anger and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain on my raiment. Ultimately talking about how much blood the Lord is going to spill, man. And who is the Lord ultimately coming for, man? Esau Edom, man, because Esau Edom has turned this world into ultimately a cesspool, man. So Yahweh's going to send his son Yahawashi back to ultimately to take these devils out of power. As the scripture in Luke says, how have I seen Satan being cast down as lightning, man? Ultimately Esau Edom falling from his glory, falling from his power seat. It says, verse 4, it says, for the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeem is come, right? Because Yahawashi is ready to come back to ultimately what? To do damage, man. As, I believe it's Isaiah 42, which I already got listed up. Let's grab that real quick. Isaiah 42 and verse 13. It says, and Yahweh shall go forth as a mighty man, and he shall stir up jealousy like a man of war, because we know that the Lord is a man of war. I believe Exodus talks about that. Yahweh is a man of war, and Yahweh is his name. It says, he shall cry, yea, roar, he shall prevail against his enemies. And who are his enemies? His number one enemy being the Edomites, man. You got these other nations. You even got 2/3 of the Lord's own people that come up against him, man. And it says, I have long time holding my peace. I have been still and refrained myself. Now will I cry like a travailing woman. I will destroy and devour at once, right? Because the Lord Yahawashi is going to come with the chariots, man. You know, the chariot's going to shoot the laser beams, you know, at the wicked, man. And he's starting with Esau, Edom. And ultimately the Lord is going to judge those, you know, especially 2/3 of his people that's that's with this system, that's joining hand in hand with Esau, Edom, man. Ultimately the Lord is going to judge, you know, his people. Hey, and who is the Lord ultimately going to judge? These Edomites, man. You know, and he's ultimately going to take them out of power. And it says, verse 15, it says, I will make waste mountains and hills and dry up all their herbs. And I will make the rivers islands and I will dry up the pools. Right, talking about that thermonuclear destruction, man, because we understand that lake of fire is talking about America, man. America being 100% on fire. How is that going to happen, man? By the chariots of the laser beams from the chariots. And you're going to have that thermonuclear fire ultimately destroy this place, man. You know, that's going to be the end of Esau's kingdom. And it says, I'll read that again. Verse 15 says, I will make waste mountains and hills, and I will dry up all their herbs, and I will make the rivers islands, and I will dry up the pools. And right, we're almost coming up upon this time, man. Yahawashi making his second return with the angels, with the archangel Michael, to ultimately to do battle against Esau and his armies, man. Because that's ultimately what the Lord is coming back for, man. Hey, as I read in that Revelations 19, the Lord, you know, had many crowns upon his head. You know, the Lord is coming back to ultimately to take down this the heathens rule, man. Because Esau Edom is the last heathens to rule ultimately before what? You know, the nation of Israel began to rule forever, man. Let's grab this. This is the book of Daniel 7 verse 9. It says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. Who was the Ancient of Days? Yahawah. Whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as the burning fire, right? It says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, man. Because what? The Lord, you know, is going to send his son, Yahawashi, back to ultimately to cast down all heathen rule, man. You know, because what? Who's in power right now? Beginning with the Edomites, you know, the basis of all men. You know, what's that? Daniel 4:17. The Lord setteth up over it the basis of men. We had the basis of men ruling this earth right now, man. That's why everything is so jacked up. That's why this world is a cesspool as we know it to be right now. And that's why these heathens, you know, are just running rampant, man, eating all type of abominations. You know, hey, you got you know, sodomites running around, adultery, you know, is at its heights, man. Because who's in rulership? The basis of men. So Yahawashi is going to come back to take down all these heathens, man, beginning with the Edomites, man. Because ultimately what? Esau Edom is in his heaven right now. And the Lord is going to cast them down. As I already got it queued up. It's in Luke. Yep. Luke 10 verse 18, it says, and he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Right? Who's in their rulership right now? Who's in their heaven? The so-called white man. But ultimately what? Yahawashi is ultimately going to come back and ultimately what? To take him out of power. You know, I had did a lesson, what was this, yesterday or the day prior, talking about, you know, America was established upon violence, will ultimately end by violence, man. And it talks about in Revelations 18 how this place America is going to be destroyed in 1 hour, man. It's only going to take YAHAWASHI to destroy this place, and it's going to take him 1 hour, man. You know, Yahawah is going to send his son Yahawashi back, man. You know, ultimately to do damage, and ultimately what? The end result of this place America is going to be by what? Fire, man. You know, those thermonuclear fires turning this place into a what? A lake of fire, you know? And that's what Yahawashi is coming back to do. Yahawah is going to send his son Yahawashi back to ultimately what? To establish order. And it starts with what? The destruction of America, man. You know, as the elder brother Murph always say out here, you can't put sugar on shit and call it a sandwich, man. You know? America has to go before the kingdom of heaven to be established, man. For the Lord to establish his government here on the planet Earth, man. You know? And this world will finally be ruled in righteousness, man. Under what? Yahawashi and the elect governing body, man. You know? But it ultimately starts with the Lord coming back to take this devil out of power, man. This is the book of Revelation 6 and verse 1. It says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, come and see, right? That Lamb being Yahawashi, man. You know, it talks about that in John, the 1st chapter, you know, that Lamb being Yahawashi. And it says, verse 2, and I said, I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And it says, and he went forth conquering and to conquer, right? Because the Lord Yahawashi is going to come back on that, that fathership. And he's ultimately what? Is going to conquer and to conquer, man. It says conquering and to conquer. As I read that Revelations 19, man, the Lord had many crowns upon his head, man. The Lord is coming back to take down all heathen rule, man. Hey, Daniel 7, which I just read. Until the thrones were cast down, the Ancient of Days did sit, man. We're coming upon that time, man. Well, Yahawashi is going to set up his government upon the planet Earth, man. And this is what we long for, man, for ultimately what? The Lord to set up a righteous government here upon planet Earth, man. Lord willing would be of that, of the elect, that we may, be heirs with Yahawashi to rule alongside Yahawashi, man. To ultimately what? To set this earth in order, man. This is the book of Isaiah 2 and verse 1. It says, the word that Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem, right, the southern and the northern kingdom. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain, right, because the mountain is synonymous with government. It says that the mountain of Yahweh's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it, right? Because, the government of Israel, that Yahweh BAHASHAM is going to set up, he's going to have his elect governing body. It's going to be upon all these other governments, man. These different, because hills represent smaller governments and mountains represent big governments, man. Hey, because ultimately who's going to be at the top, man? Hey, the nation of Israel, man. Bear with me for a second. Yeah, who's going to be at the top, man? Hey, the nation of Israel, man. Ultimately ruling this world in righteousness, man. Under who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Bear with me for a second. Read that again. Isaiah 2 and verse 2. And it says, it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of Yahweh's house shall be established in the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it, right? All these heathen nations, man. Because what? They're going to come unto us to learn the ways of YAHAWASHI. This world, ultimately what? Will be ruled in righteousness. The law, statutes, and commandments ultimately will go forth across the four corners of the world. And ultimately we're going to rule the world in righteousness, man. Because this world is ultimately ruled in wickedness under who the world, will call the so-called white man, the Edomites. And it says, verse 3, it says, and many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up unto the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of Yahweh of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths, for out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem, right? Because we're going to ultimately institute the laws, statutes, and commandments across the four corners of the world, man. These heathen nations will come into us to ultimately to learn the ways of YAHAWASHI, man. And we're ultimately going to rule this world in a righteous way, man. What the Lord always intended, man. This world to be ruled in righteousness, man. And everything that we're seeing right now, all this wickedness, man. Hey, once Yahweh sent his son Yahawashi back, all that's going to be done away with, man. As the world as we know it right now, man. And it all begins with what? The second return of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. His name is Yahawashi. Ultimately laying this place down, man. America, Babylon the Great. Because America, this place ultimately what? Pushes wickedness to the rest of the world, man. Esau's philosophies, Esau's wickedness. Even in Malachi it says they shall call him the border of wickedness, man. Once Yahawashi returns, man, the Lord is going to do away with all that, but ultimately what? Taking his devil out of power, man. And the whole world is going to be ruled in righteousness, man. Let's get this Revelations 12. And I'm going to close out with this one, Lord willing. This is the book of Revelations 12 and 7. And it says, when it reads, and there was war in heaven, it says Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, right? You're going to have Yahawashi, you're going to have the archangel Michael, and the angels ultimately doing war with Esau, Edom, and the world armies, man. The war in heaven, which is soon to happen, man. Hey, in the midst of World War III, Yahawashi is going to make his second return and ultimately invade the earth, man. It says, verse 8, it says, and prevail not, neither was their place found any more in heaven, right? Because the Lord is ultimately going to take these devils out of power, man. As I read in that Luke, how has Satan, has been cast down from heaven? The Lord is going to take this devil out of his power seat, man. You know, because ultimately Yahawah BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI was the one to put this devil in power, and Yahawah BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI is going to be the one to take this devil out of power. Yahawah is going to send his son YAHAWASHI back to do that very thing, man. And it says, verse 9, it says, and the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceived the whole world, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him, right? You know, you can read the same account of what's that, 2nd Esdras, the 13th chapter, if I'm not mistaken, man. How ultimately it talks about, you know, the great multitude, talking about the great multitude, you know, which ultimately, you know, did war against the man that came out of the sea. You know, talking about YAHAWASHI. You know, YAHAWASHI is coming back to take down all heathen dominion, man. And that ultimately begins for what? You know, the Lord taking down these Edomites, man. You know, going back, tying them back into that Revelations 19 I read, man. The Lord had many crowns upon his head, man. You know, Daniel 7, you know, till the thrones were cast down. You know, this is what the Lord is ultimately coming back to do, man. And then what's going to happen? Isaiah 2 I just read, man. The Lord is going to set up a righteous government here on planet Earth, man. You know? And that's where we're at, man. That's where ultimately where everything is aiming towards, man. The destruction of America and the return of YAHAWASHI standing up his government upon earth, man. But I'm gonna end it off right here. You know, Lord, I hope this lesson was edifying. I want to end up by giving all praise, honor, and glory to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, BAHASHAM, double honors to the elders and the apostles of great millstone that taught us the truth, and salutations to the hopeful elect that's around the four corners of the globe. Lord, I hope this lesson was edifying. Till next time, Kwam Yasharallah, Shalom, and the Bible Ball. Until next time, Lord willing.